Hello, everybody. Today is a fantastic day. My name's Stu Turley, President and CEO of the Sandstone Group, and today is April 20th. Welcome to the Energy Newsbeat Daily Stand-Up Show. Michael's on assignment, so it's just me today. We've got a wild show for you today. First story coming around the corner is Janet Yellen says sanctions may risk the homogeneity of the U.S. dollar. Michael and I talked about that a lot yesterday. We also have another one follow-up story on Germany has shut down its reactors. Now the climate folks are a little upset. Should be kind of fun. And then the G7 ministers call for the end of natural gas. Wow. Then you got to sit down and talk about where would we be without a good story from New England? There's a Maine transmission line up there that has cost a lot of money and is how not to upgrade the grid. So I also have one last one here. Michael and I also talked about yesterday on the pipelines. Russia yesterday had gotten a notification that they were just unbelievably pushing out large volumes of their exporting energy. Here is another story from the Carnegie Endowment for International Peace. What Russia's first gas pipeline to China reveals about a planned second one. We had talked about how this is going to play into the future and how sanctions just don't work. So with that, like, subscribe, tell your friends, tell your neighbor, tell your pastor, tell everybody. And we do appreciate all the support, all the questions that we get at energynewsbeat.com. Let us know. Michael and I will address everything that we possibly can and get those answers and questions back to you. First story coming around the corner. Janet Yellen says sanctions may risk the homogeneity of the U.S. dollar. I'll tell you what, Irina Slav out of Bulgaria and I have had a lot of fun talking over the last several years. Sanctions don't work. This is a quote out of this economic sanctions imposed on Russia and other countries by the United States. The dollar's dominance at risk, targeted nations seek out an alternative. The United States has used the dollar, which was as a weapon. And when you tie the weapon of the dollar and you tie it to poor political enforcement methodologies, you're going to have people avoiding and countries avoiding sanctions. Iran first showed Russia how to do it. Now, Russia has really taken that to the next level. And so Russia has been avoiding sanctions. They are pumping more oil now than they did at the beginning of COVID. So even Miss Yellen said there is a risk when we use financial sanctions that are linked to the role of the dollar that over time it could undermine the homogeneity of the dollar. You think? This has really come back around because China has been instrumental in the BRICS Foundation movement and moving away from the petrodollar to the petro-yuan. And I mean, this is happening. Yesterday's podcast had some critical information in there. Miss Yellen in this article also says, and we haven't seen any other country that has had basic institutional infrastructure that would enable its currency to serve the world like this. Well, guess what? That is now in place. And the U.S. Really, who's going to buy the U.S. debt? You can't print money. You can't go through all that. So when you sit back and kind of go through all that, it makes it kind of tough. Hang on. Let me put a pause. So her quote is actually Miss Yellen's quote. When asked about the possibility of using frozen Russian assets to rebuild a war-ravaged Ukraine after Moscow's invasion, Miss Yellen said that Russia should pay for damages that it has caused. But she also noticed there are legal constraints on what we can do with frozen Russian assets, and we're discussing with our partners what might lie in the future. Okay. I will just kind of like leave my opinions here for now, but just know that sanctions don't work. And as a politician, you need to consider sanctions, diplomacy, and talking about things before it becomes an invasion. So anyway, a little armchair quarterbacking there, and sanctions don't work. Now, let's turn around to the next corner here. Germany has shut down its last 3 nuclear plants, and some climate scientists are aghast. Interesting article. This one, you really cannot have your climate crisis and then complain about it when your climate folks shut down nuclear plants. We are not going to get to carbon net zero. We're not going to get to anything that you want in that area without nuclear. So Germany and California have some of the most expensive energy in the world, and nuclear is, you must have nuclear energy. In Texas, we have wind, solar, nuclear, natural gas. We just the Texas legislature just put out a proposal, or a bill for, I believe it was $10 billion on natural gas plants. We have the newest coal fleet. We don't care what kind of energy it is. We want what's best for the environment. That's the same kind of thing you got to do when you're out there shutting down nuclear plants. And I'm going to get on my little stick here for just a second. And that is, France has, I believe, around 50 to 52 nuclear plants. I believe, and they are only operating at 25% capacity because of the lack of maintenance that they have put into those nuclear reactors. So Germany, in this article here, says that Germany will continue to be first class in the wider nuclear supply chain in areas such as fuel fabrication and decommissioning. That is not going to help the climate crisis group, but it's going to mean that they're going to help with decommissioning. Boy, I kind of like what the Biden administration did. I hate to give them a shout out, but I will give them a shout out that we're looking at loaning money to Poland to help put in nuclear reactors. So shout out to the Biden administration on that one. Here we are again, the G7 ministers to call for natural gas phase out. I'm not sure how to really talk about this one. When you sit back and talk about Kerry, and you talk about all of the other folks in Japan talking about the G7 plan, and you talk about the migration to renewable energy. I just had a great interview with Chuck McConnell. He is a true industry thought leader, and I really am looking forward to putting this podcast out with him. And it's really about using all forms of energy, looking at carbon capture, looking at delivering the lowest cost kilowatt per hour to the consumers, so that the renewable energy, the nuclear energy, the natural gas is all sustainable. And if anybody's listening to this podcast, please, I welcome any industry thought leaders to step onto our podcast. I want to talk to you. I want to hear what's going on, and would love to visit with you about that. Coming up around the corner to Maine, the fate of a key transmission line in Maine is on trial now. This is a discussion that I had the opportunity to visit with Meredith in her book when not very long ago, and it was Shorting the Grid. And it is a phenomenal book. She is truly a industry thought leader. And we discussed this when you have New England in Maine's, the New England Clean Energy Connect, a long running effort by Massachusetts. I can't even say that. Boy, I'm in Texas. A long running effort, 1,200 megawatts of electricity produced from hydropower in Quebec. Instead, the project storyline resembles an unending mishaps of the Odysseus journey from Troy, or perhaps more contemporarily, the twist of Shonda Rhimes' show. The transmission line doesn't need to get away with murder, but it's on trial this week. I've got a few jokes, and we'll just leave those alone for now. Like fourth paragraph down in this article, the Department of Energy found that there's a pressing need for more transmission infrastructure around the country to keep the grid reliable while incorporating renewable power. However, its recent history is riddled with failed or delayed projects, and the NECEC saga shows how much can go wrong along the way. This is critical because in order for us to get past the energy crisis, we're going to have to make sure that we get permitting reform done. Let me give you my 2 cents here. In order to get past inflation, in order to get past the banking crisis going on, in order to get past everything, we need to lower the interest rates, get the opportunity for business leaders to have low cost of capital. But it can only be done if we lower the cost of energy. The only way to fight inflation or even the geopolitical problems around the world is by accessing all of the low energy that the United States could produce and reduce the power. That's my 2 cents. And we're going to move on to the next one here. So now that I've solved most of the world's problems, here's my last article. What Russia's first gas pipeline to China reveals about a planned second one. Michael and I talked about this a while ago. I got word on this first one when the sanctions were first imposed on Russia. China and Russia at the beginning of the war started negotiating for the first pipeline, and they did go through Kazakhstan, I believe. Let me double check here. And the reason for that, Gazprom has long touted the first power of Siberia as highly profitable and successful project, while going great lengths not to disclose the actual parameters of the ongoing trade. In June 2014, when the project was launched, following the figures were made public, Russia would sell China 38 billion cubic meters of gas annually, totaling 1,000 BCM over a 30-year contract, with estimated sale price of 350 to 400 per 1,000 cubic meters. Pretty good stuff, but that has really changed. This article goes through the newer information and how the pipeline does visit in. I did visit with a executive from Gazprom probably 4 or 5 years ago at a investment conference, and it was amazing how little money Gazprom has to actually pay to bring natural gas to market. And you would be surprised. It is in the cents, not the dollars. So they can actually make, no wonder Russia is making so much money off of their energy. So when we take a look at the pipelines, these pipelines coming around are critical for the long-term dollar amounts and the long-term sustainability of Russia. Russia has moved away from sanctions. They don't have to deal with it. They are now working on not using the petrodollar, and they have everything on the road. So all these stories kind of blend in together. And I hope that all this makes a lot of fun and a lot of sense. But by the way, you're going to have a great day. Thanks for listening to the Energy News Beat podcast. Check us out on all of the areas where you can get your podcasts on the energynewsbeat.com, on the Energy News Beat at Substack, and reach out to me, and I'd love to visit with you. Thanks, and have a great day.